Today, I decided to give you guys a ranking of the Saw franchise. This is a gruesome series of films that started in '04 and was originally directed by James Wan. The series has been ongoing ever since, and we're getting a 10th film called Saw X sometime this year. So I figured without further ado, I give you guys my ranking from worst to best. Starting with the worst, in ninth place we have Saw the Final Chapter. This one is not very good. It was the last one released in the main series before they essentially did a soft sequel with Jigsaw, and it's nothing special. The final chapter you would think would deliver something kind of interesting, being called the final chapter, but all you get is lame 3D effects, really bad pink blood. I heard that the reason why the blood is pink in the movie has something to do with the 3D technology and the cameras they were using. They essentially needed the blood to be pink to show up on the 3D cameras, but it looks bad. And I don't have the 3D version of the movie anyway, so it just looks cheap. A very lackluster and boring entry that wraps up the Hoffman storyline and doesn't really do anything else of merit. Well, I guess it kills off some important characters, but just not very good. I do not recommend it. Just skip it. Coming in at number 8 is 2007's Saw 4. This one is just kind of a rinse and repeat movie. It was also the first one that James Wan wasn't heavily involved in. He was pretty heavily involved in the first 3, and he was only executive producer after that. 4 essentially features a really lame plot of a cop who is a little bit gung-ho, so to speak, and doesn't wait for orders, and that's why he's being tested. A pretty lazy excuse for a movie. It's also the first one that has Hoffman as more or less the Jigsaw killer. And he's okay as a character, but kind of forgettable in this movie. He gets a little better as the series goes along, but Saw 4 is just kind of forgettable and one that I don't really recommend. Coming in at number 7 is 2017's Jigsaw. This film was essentially a soft reboot of the franchise. It's still a sequel and acknowledges the other films, but they made it basically to where you could just jump into this one having not seen the originals. Well, you should have seen the first one, but that's the one you really have to watch to understand this movie. It's not a very good film. I think the traps are kind of lame. The characters aren't very likable. The production budget is higher this time around, and things look a little bit nicer on camera, or at least cleaner, but somehow the film still feels a little bit cheap at times. Jigsaw is barely in the movie, despite being called Jigsaw, and it has a lame twist that I won't reveal here, but I didn't really dig this one too much. Kind of a middling film. Coming in at number 6 is Saw 5. Released in 2008, Saw 5 essentially sees Hoffman being hunted down by another cop named Strom. It's an okay sequel, and I didn't mind this one. A lot of people don't like Saw 5, but I actually kind of enjoyed it. I also like the cast this time around. There's this British guy, he's kind of an asshole, and he meets a grisly end. It also features the girl from Rambo 4. I don't know the actress's name, but she's pretty good in the movie, and she's one of the final survivors. And all in all, Saw 5 is not terrible. It's an okay continuation of the franchise, and I do enjoy it for what it is, which is a relatively entertaining film. No real major gripes from me about this one, just nothing really special. Coming in at number 5 is 2021's Spiral from the Book of Saw. I wish the film had just been called Spiral, because we know it's a Saw movie, you don't need to add on dumb subtitles. But that's a modern day movie thing. This is an okay continuation. It's kind of a spin-off. It does acknowledge the other films, and it stars Chris Rock and Sam Jackson as cops. Well, Sam Jackson's a retired cop, and Chris Rock's father in the movie. All in all, it's entertaining, but there's some things that I don't like about it. For one, I hate the Jigsaw voice. It's a copycat killer this time around, and the voice they use is kind of like this female voice, and it sounds just kind of lame. The traps are also kind of standard. At this point, you'd figure we'd get something a little more complex as far as traps go, but they're okay. They're not god-awful or anything. They just kind of need some more, I guess you would say, thought put into them. It is a decent spinoff, and I think Chris Rock did a good job with this one. He's, more comedic than he is serious, but he actually plays a pretty good balance here. I did laugh a couple times at him, and he played a serious role relatively well. Not a great film, mind you, but a decent spinoff that does fit into the series, just not very Saw-like, if that makes any sense. Feels kind of like a different franchise at times. just with some Saw sprinkled in. All in all, decent. Coming in at number 4 is 2009's Saw 6. A lot of people tend to like this one over some of the other ones, and I hadn't seen it until recently. And I have to agree, I just really like the traps this time around. There's a cool shotgun carousel, which I thought was amazing. There's also this steam trap that I thought was really cool. The plot is nothing you haven't seen before this time around, but it does kind of tie in better than the other films. Also, Hoffman, who more or less is the main killer after Jigsaw, well, spoiler alert, dies in the third film, is probably at his best here. He's brutal, he's over the top, he's ruthless, and I just really like him in this movie. Saw 6 does leave some stuff to be desired compared to the James Wan trilogy. That's what I'll call the first 3, because he, directed the first and worked heavily on 2 and 3. But it is the best one post James Wan, and I do really enjoy Saw 6. Which leads us to number 3, 2006's Saw 3. Saw 3 was the finale to the original trilogy, how I look at it. It feels like it should have just been 3 movies. Hell, you could have just had 1 movie, honestly. But 3 kind of feels like the end of an era. It's the last one where you actually have Jigsaw still alive, and everything from the previous 2 films wraps up in a nice little bow. Sure, other things can happen. We've realized Jigsaw has apprentices and things like that, but 3 wraps up everything nicely, and it's kind of a good conclusion to what I consider the original trilogy. The only thing I don't like about Saw 3 is that the guy's being punished, the main guy playing the game, essentially because his child died and he's sad about it. It's like Jigsaw saying, hey, you piece of shit, you're sad about your kid dying? Well, now I'm going to kill your wife and kidnap your child, and you're going to end up dying too. Take that. It's just like the meanest thing that you could do to somebody who's lost a child. But the traps are gruesome. The kills are really intense. There's this one called the Rack, which is this trap that twists your limbs around all the way, including your head, legs, and arms, and it's just gruesome. It's an entertaining film, but not the best. I still recommend it, though, and it's an enjoyable conclusion to the original trilogy. Coming in at number 2 is Saw 2. Saw 2 essentially took the idea of the first game, people trapped in a room, and upped the ante. You have more people this time around, more complex traps, more motivation for Jigsaw. It's a bigger movie. It's a bigger sequel that takes the original ideas and expands upon them. However, I think in doing so, they lose a lot of that subtlety from the original film, which is why this is not the number 1 movie on the list. But still a great sequel, and one that I find very entertaining. I do really enjoy Saw 2, and I think that it was the last one in the series that was a damn good movie. There are some good ones after this, but this one was actually really great. And I feel after really the first trilogy, everything kind of went downhill a little bit, and 2 was probably the high point post Saw 1. An enjoyable film, one that I highly recommend, and one where I think probably has the best Jigsaw, and Tobin Bell really is giving his best performance in this one, and you have the most complex and most depth to Jigsaw out of the entire franchise. That leads us to number 1, the best film in the Saw franchise, 2004's James Wan directed Saw. The only film that I own standalone besides Spiral. Saw is just a great film. It has flaws, I'm not going to lie. Cary Elwes does not do a great job in this movie. His acting is really stiff and wooden and over the top at times. I don't know why. And I also think the film has kind of a cheap element to it. It only costs about $1 million. But that kind of adds to the fun of it all. I kind of like the cheap look of this film, and I kind of enjoy what they were going for here. I think overall, the traps are great. The blood and gore and carnage is great. It doesn't overdo it. There's not like a gore fest. It's really not that gory at all. But the gore that is on screen is very visceral. And it's one of those less is more. What you don't see is worse than what you do see. It has an amazing ending, which is the best ending to the franchise. Every other Saw movie tried to have a twist ending, but none of them come close to this one. Danny Glover stars in the film as a detective trying to hunt down this Jigsaw killer who essentially traps people and puts them in torture devices and torture scenarios that they must try their best to survive or risk mutilation and death. It's an awesome premise for a movie. And while I think the sequels did kind of lose the charm of the first few movies, this first one, Saw, really is a great horror film and one of my favorite James Wan movies. I think Saw is a really great movie for a first-time director, and James Wan really did deliver something special here. Well, that's my ranking. I hope that Saw X does improve upon some of the later sequels and gives us something a little more deep than what we've been getting lately. I kind of had an idea for a Saw movie that's basically based on the Saw 3D poster. In the Saw 3D poster, you actually see this monument being built to Jigsaw, this giant statue. I thought, wouldn't it be cool if the whole world is taken over by the mentality of John Kramer and decide just to torture everybody, and the whole world just goes crazy with Saw traps. As over the top as that sounds, that's what I'd like to see in a Saw movie, but I don't think it'll ever happen. I do hope that it's good, and I am looking forward to it. There are 2 Saw video games that are released on the 360 and PS3 called Saw and Saw 2. So if you do like Saw, there is other media out there that you can check out. All in all, it's a fun series, and one that I do recommend, and one that is very gruesome. Thanks for watching my video. That's my list. Leave yours down below if you'd like, and peace out.